They never saw the matchbook tucked inside her sleeve, never noticed the gasoline hidden behind the janitor's closet, never realized that Lila Monroe had already made peace with becoming exactly what they always accused her of being. The flames touched the lockers first. Row after row of dented steel burst alive with heat, each one blistering under the weight of history. Stickers curled into ash, paint peeled back like skin. Some lockers had hearts carved into them. Others were marked with cruelty. But one name screamed louder than the rest. Lucas. Her dead name. Not painted. Carved. Scraped in so deep it had outlasted 2 renovations and at least 3 coats of institutional beige. No one tried to cover it. No one cared to. Lila struck the match. This wasn't supposed to be her story. She was supposed to graduate quietly, leave town, build a life in a city where no one knew what she used to look like, where no one called her it when they thought she couldn't hear, where her name wasn't a punchline, or worse, a relic. But that morning, everything she had tried to bury was waiting for her, right outside the girls' bathroom. Lucas, black marker, all caps. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She just stood there. "What the hell?" Jules had muttered beside her. "Do you want me to tell someone?" Lila didn't answer. What would she even say? The teachers would shrug, the counselor would smile sympathetically and offer another seminar. The principal would promise a meeting. Nothing would happen. It never did. So she skipped her last 2 classes and sat on the stairwell outside the music wing, the same place she'd hidden during her first panic attack in freshman year. She lit a cigarette she didn't even want and watched the sunlight slant through the dirty windows. That's when the idea took shape. She didn't think of it as revenge. Not really. She thought of it as erasure, but on her terms. Not to disappear, to burn what wouldn't let her live. She remembered the school's blueprints, a project from sophomore year. Knew the vent systems, knew the broken sprinklers, knew how long it would take the janitor to finish his usual smoke out back. At exactly 3:41 p.m., as the staff settled into a meeting in the admin wing, Lila walked past the science lab door. She moved quietly, deliberately, no shaking, no second thoughts, just focus. Inside the lab, the supplies waited like old friends. Ethanol, potassium permanganate, sulfur for drama, though she didn't need it. She worked fast, poured and prepped and soaked every flammable inch of linoleum. The smell of chemicals made her lightheaded, but she kept moving. Her hands didn't tremble. When the final bell rang, she struck the match. The fire rolled forward like a secret being set free. It began as a low whisper, then roared upward into something primal, a living thing with breath and hunger. She didn't run, she walked, past the lockers, past the cafeteria where she'd once been tripped in front of an entire table of laughing sophomores, past her old locker, still bent from the time someone kicked it shut on her hand, past the auditorium where she had tried to sing as herself and heard the word freak whispered between verses. And she walked past Daniel Reese. He froze mid-laugh when he saw the flames racing toward the ceiling. His eyes widened. He shouted something. She kept walking. The fire alarm blared above her. Sprinklers hissed. Water coughed out of rusted pipes, but didn't reach the blaze. Screams echoed from down the hall. Footsteps thundered as students flooded the exits. Outside, chaos bloomed. Students spilled onto the lawn, coughing, crying. Teachers yelled names into clipboards. Parents began to arrive. Phones buzzed with alerts and rumors. Someone said it was an accident. Then someone pointed at her. Lila stood still in the middle of it all, soot on her cheeks, mascara streaking her face like war paint. And then Jules ran to her. "What the hell did you do?" she whispered, gripping Lila's arms. Lila didn't answer. She just stared at the smoke curling into the sky, watching the fire chew through bricks and memories. It wasn't revenge, it was reckoning. Because this building didn't forget. It remembered her the way the town did, as a mistake, a disruption, a shadow trying to pretend it was real. So she lit a match and reminded them what shadows could do when cornered. Sirens howled from blocks away. Lila turned and walked toward them. She wasn't afraid, because fire forgets nothing, and neither would she. The smoke had barely cleared when the handcuffs snapped shut. They pushed her face down onto the grass. Gravel bit into her cheek. Someone shouted her old name behind a phone screen. Another voice hissed, "Freak!" She didn't flinch, not even when her wrist twisted too far. They threw her into the back of the squad car. The door slammed shut with finality. Through the tinted window, the building still burned. Inside the interrogation room, everything buzzed with artificial life. The fluorescent lights, the air vent, the low hum of cameras recording her every move. She sat still. Across the table, a detective watched her like a man looking at something he couldn't explain. "You want to tell me why you did it?" She didn't look at him. "People could have died." Her voice, when it came, was calm, unapologetic. "They didn't." He stared at her, then leaned back, exhaling like he had hoped for a different kind of monster. "You're 17. That makes this complicated." Lila met his eyes. "They'll try me as an adult." He didn't disagree. Instead, he stood and left her alone with her reflection in the one-way glass. She studied herself. Hair a mess, shirt stained, the smallest trace of ash still under her nails. She didn't look sorry, she looked finished. They held her overnight in a holding cell the size of a janitor's closet. Cold floor, flickering lights. She slept sitting up, her back pressed against the wall, eyes open most of the night. In the morning, a woman with sharp eyes and sharper posture appeared outside the bars. "Lila Monroe?" she asked. Lila nodded. "I'm your attorney, Marcia Lynn." She spoke like she had no time for pity. "They're charging you with felony arson, public endangerment, possible sentencing of up to 10 years if it escalates. If anyone comes forward with an injury, we're in deeper." "They won't," Lila said. "I made sure." Marcia raised an eyebrow. "That may be the most impressive part, but it won't stop them from trying to make an example out of you." Lila stayed quiet. "You want to plead guilty?" "No." "Then what do you want?" Lila's eyes didn't waver. "I want to speak." Marcia's lips tightened. "That's not how this usually works." "I don't care how it usually works." Marcia watched her for a long moment. Then finally she said, "All right. If you're going to stand trial, you better be ready to be a symbol, and symbols don't get privacy. They don't get peace." "I never had peace." "Then you've got nothing to lose." The arraignment came 2 days later. They gave her an oversized jumpsuit, the fabric bunched awkwardly around her arms. Her name was announced loud and slow, her real name, and even that felt like rebellion. A ripple passed through the room. Reporters took notes. Parents glared. One woman crossed herself and looked away. The judge barely glanced at her. When asked how she pled, Lila didn't hesitate. "Not guilty." Gasps, scribbled headlines. The hum of 100 opinions forming at once. That night, her name trended across every major platform. Some praised her bravery, others demanded punishment. Clips of the fire looped endlessly. Talk shows dragged her identity into their spin cycles. "Lucas," they wrote, again and again. As if that could erase what she had done. As if burning down a building had somehow been less of a shock than declaring her existence. The school stayed closed. 3 classrooms reduced to ash. The auditorium destroyed. Part of the chemistry wing collapsed. But the hallway remained. The wall with her dead name still stood. The marker had melted, but the carving remained, jagged, deep, unapologetic. No one cleaned it. No one tried. Jules visited a week later. They gave them 10 minutes under flickering lights. A guard stood at the door, arms crossed. "You didn't tell me," Jules said. "You would have stopped me." Jules didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her coat and pulled out a small object wrapped in tissue. Lila unfolded it slowly. It was her old pocket knife, the same one she'd used to carve her real name into a desk last spring, when a substitute teacher refused to acknowledge it. "They're still calling you Lucas," Jules whispered. "On Reddit, on Twitter. They think if they keep saying it, it'll undo everything." Lila held the knife like it was made of glass. "They don't understand," she said. "They don't want to." Lila looked at the guard, then handed the knife back. "Keep it," she said, "for when they ask why I did it." Jules nodded, eyes wet. "They're going to put you away for a long time." "Maybe." "Then what was the point?" Lila stood. "The point was to stop pretending I was never here." By the time Lila's trial date was announced, her name had already become something larger than herself. News anchors debated her like a symbol. Podcasts dissected her like a case study. Comment sections turned her body into battlegrounds of belief. But none of them were in the cell with her. None of them saw her wake up every morning in concrete silence, eyes tracing cracks in the ceiling like they might eventually form a map out of this place. She filled journals with sketches, charcoal portraits of people she had never met, girls with scars on their knuckles, boys with eyes too old for their faces, and fire. Always fire, crawling up walls, dancing around silhouettes. Marcia visited weekly with court updates and media clippings. "You've split the country," she said one afternoon, dropping a folder on the table. "Half of them want you locked up forever. The other half wants you canonized." Lila opened the folder. Her eyes moved over headlines. "Arsonist or activist? The girl who burned her name into history." She closed it. "Do they even remember the wall?" Marcia sighed. "They remember the fire. That's what scares them." It was true. The district had hired contractors to assess the damage, but they'd left the hallway intact, the one with her dead name still carved into the plaster, the one no one ever fixed. Kids started calling it the ghost wall. Jules told her about it during another visit, said someone had added her real name underneath in red marker. It got scrubbed off within hours. The dead name stayed. "Teachers are still calling roll with it," Jules said. Like nothing happened. Lila stared at the table between them. "It's not about the name anymore," she said. "It's about the silence." The day of the trial, the courthouse overflowed. Outside, crowds pressed against barricades. Some carried signs that read, "Justice for Lila." Others held up photos of the school, in flames like evidence of a crime against God. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Lila sat straight in her seat, wrists uncuffed for optics, but her presence still put people on edge. The jury avoided eye contact. The judge cleared his throat too often. The prosecution came prepared. Photos, diagrams, witnesses. They painted her as methodical, dangerous. They emphasized that this wasn't impulsive. It was planned. They were right. But they missed the point. When Daniel Reese took the stand, he wore a polished suit and a polished lie. "She walked past me while the building burned," he said. "Didn't even blink. She looked proud." He paused for dramatic effect. "She always acted like she was better than everyone. Even before the change." The courtroom was silent. Lila didn't react. Inside, something ancient simmered, but she kept it hidden. Marcia leaned over and whispered, "You ready?" Lila nodded. They called her to the stand the next morning. Cameras clicked. The room held its breath. She adjusted the microphone. "My name is Lila Monroe." No one spoke. "I've heard a lot about who I am in the past few weeks, that I'm unstable, violent, a danger to others." She looked at the jury. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I'm here to ask why it took a fire for anyone to notice me." She paused, then continued. "For years, I asked for help. I reported the bullying. I corrected the roll calls. I waited for someone to do something." Her voice tightened. No one did. Her eyes moved to the judge, then back to the crowd. "I didn't want to hurt anyone. I wanted to be heard. I wanted the hate to stop living on those walls. So I did what I had to do." The prosecution objected. The judge told her to step down, but she kept talking. "I am not a phase. I am not a ghost. I am not your lesson in tolerance." She stood up. "I am fire, and fire doesn't apologize." They cut her mic. The courtroom erupted. Some stood. Others screamed. Reporters scribbled furiously. Outside, the footage exploded online. Clips of her testimony went viral before court even recessed. 20 million views in 12 hours. Celebrities tweeted support. Politicians tweeted condemnation. Hashtags trended like aftershocks. "I am Lila. Burn the silence. Her name was Lila." That night, Marcia returned to her holding cell with tired eyes. "You made your statement," she said. "I told the truth." Marcia didn't argue, but she didn't smile either. "The jury's still people, Lila. They might hear your voice, but they don't all understand it." Lila leaned back against the wall. "They don't have to." She looked out the small, barred window at the starless night. "They just have to remember it." Winter bled into the edges of everything. The windows at the juvenile facility were fogged with breath and frost. Inside, the air felt heavier than the concrete it pressed against. Lila didn't mark the days. She marked the silences. How many hours passed before someone said her real name? How many looks she got from staff like she was a storm waiting to break? How many times she caught herself staring at the floor, wondering if the fire had really happened, or if it was just something she dreamed up in a moment of desperation. Jules kept showing up, every Saturday, 10 minutes at a time, behind a scratched plexiglass window. She brought stories, some soft, some burning. They painted over the wall, Jules said once, sliding a photo through the slot. It was a snapshot of the hallway, a clean off-white surface where her Deadname used to be. They finally erased it, Jules added. Lila stared at the image, her fingers pressed to the glass. They didn't erase it, she said quietly. They just buried it. Jules didn't disagree. The public hadn't quieted. If anything, the noise had mutated. Some people called the fire a wake-up call. Others demanded laws banning ideological terrorism. Fundraisers bloomed across the internet. Legal defense funds, protest supplies, even scholarships in her name. Lila, lives in light always. That one made her laugh, but the truth was harder to swallow. The building was gone. The trial was over, but she still lived inside the sentence. The jury had returned a verdict of guilty. The judge sentenced her to a juvenile rehabilitation program with a chance of early release after 18 months. That night, after the sentencing, Marcia visited one last time. "You made it through?" she said. Lila shook her head. "I lit the match. I didn't make it through anything." Marcia placed a hand on the table. "You don't get to decide what this becomes. People will use your story, twist it, worship it, burn it, all of it." "I didn't do it for them." "Then who?" Lila didn't answer, not right away. She thought of the knife, the locker, the desk carved with her name in jagged strokes because the teachers wouldn't say it out loud. The ash. "I did it for the girl who couldn't breathe every time she walked down that hallway." Marcia exhaled. "Then make sure that girl knows it mattered." Life at the center fell into patterns. Wake up, therapy, chores, study, sleep. The staff tried to treat her like any other resident, but none of them had viral fan accounts. None of them had made the news for blowing the walls off a system. They assigned her a counselor, soft-spoken, earnest. He asked about her dreams, about her regrets. She gave him silence, but she drew. Every day, she drew fire and names and girls who looked like her, but not. Girls she had never met. Girls who had stories too quiet for courtrooms and microphones. Then one day, a new girl arrived. She had a shaved head and bruises under her eyes. Her fists were always clenched, even in sleep. The staff warned Lila to keep her distance, but the girl approached her at lunch. "You're the one who burned the school." Lila didn't respond. The girl sat anyway. "They told me about you, in holding, said you made them listen." Still, Lila said nothing. The girl leaned in, her voice lowered. "Thanks." 2 syllables. But they lit something in Lila that no match ever could. They became quiet friends, shared card games, stories in code. No one asked too many questions. Weeks passed, then months. Lila started sleeping again. She wrote more, spoke more, laughed more than she expected. One afternoon, she was called into the director's office. She assumed it was about a hearing, another report, a new restriction. But Marcia was there. "You've been granted early release," she said. Lila blinked. "It's official. Next month. You'll be out." The words didn't register. "They cited impact," Marcia said. "Said your continued detainment wasn't in public interest." Lila tried to speak. Nothing came out. Marcia handed her an envelope. "It's from Jules." Inside was a letter. "Dear Lila, the wall's gone. They didn't just paint over it. They took it down. The hallway doesn't exist anymore. They're rebuilding that whole wing. They don't say why, but we know. It's because of you. We kept the pressure on, signed petitions, held rallies. Even some of the teachers joined. They couldn't ignore it forever. So, when you come back, know this. There's still fire out here, but now it burns with you, not against you. Soon, Jules." Lila folded the letter carefully. Her hands didn't shake. For the first time in years, they didn't shake at all. The gates opened at dawn. Snow crunched under her boots as she stepped out, breath blooming in the air like smoke from a memory. Jules waited by the car, hands buried in her jacket. No words, just a nod. A look that said everything. Lila walked the last steps alone. No cuffs, no handlers. just her name echoing in her chest, clean and sharp in hers. They didn't talk right away. The ride was quiet, the kind of silence that felt earned, the kind that comes after the fire has died, when the embers glow soft but hot. "You look different," Jules said finally. "I feel the same," Lila replied. "You feel real." Lila didn't answer, but she smiled. The city hadn't changed, not really. People still stared, billboards still glowed, news still cycled outrage. But there was something different in the way the world looked at her now. They drove past a mural. It was 10 feet tall, splashed across the side of an old bookstore. It showed a girl with a matchbook in one hand and a name carved into her arm, not as a wound, but as armor. Underneath, it read, "She refused to be erased." Lila didn't blink. They kept driving. Jules took her to a place called The Center. Half youth resource hub, half community co-op. It was loud and alive, full of color and reclaimed furniture. Someone had hung a sign over the door that read, "Welcome home, fire starter." People looked up when she entered. No one stared, no one whispered. A few smiled. One girl handed her a sketchbook. "We saved you a seat," she said. Lila sat. For once, she didn't have to explain who she was. Later that week, Jules took her back to what was left of the school. The campus was fenced off now. Most of the structure had been torn down. But the hallway where it began, that scar of concrete and memory, remained untouched. Locals had started calling it the Ash Line, a place where silence ended, a memorial made of soot and story. Someone had nailed a new plaque to the chain-link fence, Lila Monroe, student, survivor, spark. Beneath it, dozens of handwritten notes fluttered in the wind. Messages, thanks, names, stories. Some were signed, most weren't. Lila reached through the bars and touched the plaque. Then she pulled something from her coat pocket. The matchbook, worn, unused, saved. She didn't light it, didn't need to. She held it tight, then tucked it beneath the fence next to the notes. Jules stood beside her, quiet. "What now?" she asked. Lila looked up at the sky, then down at her hands. "I don't need to burn anything else," she said. "Now I build." In the months that followed, the story continued to ripple. Legislators debated protections for trans students. Schools began reviewing complaint systems. Some tried to ban books that mentioned her name. Others made space for it. Lila didn't chase the spotlight. She let the story move without her, let it become myth or movement or memory. She wrote sometimes, drew always. Once she gave a talk at a local college, not about the fire, about survival, about breath, about names. Someone in the audience asked, "If you could go back, would you still do it?" Lila paused. "Yes," she said, "but this time, I'd bring water too." The room fell quiet, then came the applause. She left before the end. Didn't need the praise. She had already heard her name, heard it enough times that it felt real, heard it from her own mouth, from the mouths of kids who found the courage to speak after her, from the notes left at the ash line. One day a girl approached her outside a coffee shop. "Are you her?" she asked. Lila just nodded. The girl smiled. "Me too." Then she walked away. Lila stood there, the cold air soft against her skin. No fire this time, just warmth. Because some names don't burn, they shine.